Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming tonight. My name is Cheryl Cook. I'm the co-chair of the Community for Care here in the town of Simsbury. This is my co-chair,
Woody Eddins, and I welcome you all here as well. Welcome our television audience, and thank the Simsbury Television for being here.
Yes, and tonight we are presenting our program of Talk Saves Lives. We have with us a Simsbury resident, Mr. Tom Steen. He is the Executive Director of the Capital Area Substance Abuse Council and has a great deal of experience giving this program, and I think you will find the information informative and useful. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Steen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. A rainy night as it is. We need the rain, so no complaints. And I appreciated the opportunity, being a Simsbury resident. If there's anything I can do to give back to my community, I do it, and that's why I'm here today. That's me. I'm a retired YMCA director and now do substance abuse prevention work with a regional action council called KSAC, Capital Area Substance Abuse Council. We are one of 13 in the state of Connecticut. My agency serves the Simsbury area and surrounding towns, including Hartford and some towns to the south. So a very wide and large area. 3 years ago, my agency, through a federal grant, got the opportunity to begin to do some work in suicide prevention, and my life changed. And so anytime I can get out and to talk about suicide prevention, I certainly do that. So I have a really basic introductory program for you. As you can see, I'm a master trainer in QPR. QPR stands for Question, Persuade, and Refer, which is a gatekeeper training for folks in a lifespan to know what the risks and associated issues connected to somebody who could potentially be at risk for suicide. It's a great program. I've trained about 300 people in the state of Connecticut to be a trainer, and continue to do that, working with several school systems now, and providing QPR training for students. So it's really very positive. Also, I'm a Connect Prevention Post-Prevention trainer. That's kind of prevention, but also post-prevention. What do you do when a community and a family suffers a loss to suicide? There are safe ways to handle it, and so I've gone into many towns, including Simsbury, talking about what we do in a post-prevention scenario. And then part of my volunteer work, and actually what you're going to see here tonight, is a organization called the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. 2 years ago, I was asked to form a chapter here in Connecticut, Northern Connecticut. We now have a chapter. So I've begun to learn a number of their training programs, but more importantly, as a chapter, we raise money, and half the money that we raise stays right here in Northern Connecticut. So we're, crawl before you walk, before you run, and we're getting there. But it's really cool. And today's presentation was developed out of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And of course, knowing me, I kind of tweaked it up a little bit just because I wanted to do that, to help you and to help you understand what the issues are surrounding suicide and what we can do as a society to A, feel comfortable about talking about suicide, shred the stigma around it, and have a better understanding so that if loved ones around us or people in our community, or ourselves for that matter, get into what I call that dark, deep place, we know how to reach out to get folks help so we can save a life. And thus, today's presentation, Talk Saves Lives. Before I enter into the slides going forward, suicide is a tough subject. We know this. Our society talks about incest, which was never talked about before, and many other different society ills, but we still yet feel comfortable about talking about suicide. We know that 1 in 6 people are affected by suicide in one way, form, or another, whether it be a survivor or an actual somebody with lived experience have attempted suicide. So whenever I talk to a group, we know that somebody in the room has been affected. So to be safe for each other, if the material today gets a little bit too heavy, you know, it's okay to walk outside, get a breath of fresh air. We'll keep an eye on you to make sure you're all right. If you have to leave the room to go to the bathroom, just give us a thumbs up. Know that we need to take care of each other when we begin to talk about the subject of suicide. So as I said, this is a presentation. It's designed for general audiences. It's not a training program that I would normally do when I educate or train educators or go in front of schools and students in schools and to actually do a gatekeeper training. This is more generic in nature. And please, if at some point you want to ask me questions, okay, and I'll do my best to answer for you. Ladies and gentlemen, suicide is a health problem. It's the second leading cause of death in the state of Connecticut for 18 to 25-year-olds. Second, it's the 10th leading cause of death in our country, even higher than homicide. So it's a public health issue. And knowing that can help us certainly have the conversation about it. We all can prevent it. And as we go through the slides today, you'll see that there are things that we can do as people in the society that help protect us all from suicide. My presentation tonight comes in 4 categories. We'll talk a little about statistics. You know, you got to frame what is the health problem? What does it look like? What are the facts around it? There's some really interesting research happening on the foundation level that I want to share with you today. And trust me, it's pretty high tense and high-end stuff. But I think I can give you a basic overall position of it, because I think research can help us look at the problem of suicide and maybe able to treat it better as we go forward. Prevention, and that's the work I'm in, is how do we prevent suicide? And that's teaching people what are the warning signs, what are the risk factors, and then if we know somebody's trouble, how do we get them to help? And that'll be the last one. We'll talk about that as well. Here are the statistics. Worldwide, you can see that's a pretty stunning number. Around the world, every 40 seconds somebody dies by suicide. And that's reported suicide. That's not the suicides that maybe go unreported. We've gotten better at keeping track of statistical data, especially in the last few years. That's reported. Just talked about that a little bit. This slide's a little bit on the older side. I got to talk to them because there's now 2015 statistics, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. But 41,000 people died by suicide in the United States. For every suicide, there's 25 attempts. And that's interesting. And the new terminology is called people with lived experience who have survived an attempt. This is the survivor slide. These are how many people, for an individual who will die by suicide, on average affects 115 people. I submit to you, it's even larger than that. Suicide has a major financial impact on our country. Lives lost. You know, who knows, it could have been somebody who died by suicide, could have been our next president. We just don't know. And so, though this is a reality, to me, you can't put a price on a life. Here's some 2016 facts. It kind of gives you I think the pointer works, kind of. American dies every 12 minutes. So we'll probably be here 45 minutes. 3 people on average will have died during the time we're with each other. That's scary. We already talked a little bit about some of the statistics in the country. This one is a big concern, our veterans, and you've probably heard that on the news and in your reading and such. Our veterans are very, very susceptible to suicide. Here are our Connecticut statistics. Second leading cause of death, 15 to 24-year-olds. I think you can read that. Third leading for 25 to 34. And fourth leading, 35 to 54. You kind of see the progression there. It can be shocking, for sure. I always like to look at this number. We rank 47 out of 50 states as far as suicide rate is concerned. Our rate is 9.71. So why would that be? Why would we? That sounds like we're doing a pretty good job, right? 47 out of 50. Anybody give a guess in the audience why that might be? I want to try. What do you think? If you lived in Wyoming, how long would you think it would take you to get to a hospital if you lived somewhere in the middle of the country? How long would it take you to get to a hospital here in Connecticut? Right? Maybe 15, 20 minutes? We know that women attempt more than men, but men use more lethal means than women. So if you can get to if there's a suicide attempt by overdose, you can get to a hospital in 15 minutes and reverse it and save a life. So I like to think that our health system, and that's argumentative, but I think our mental health system and some of our supports systems when it comes to medical is pretty good in our state compared to other states. It can be a lot better, but it's pretty good. So here's the research. When I look at this slide, it just hits me. It's so true. There's no single cause. And I know there's some medical people in the room here tonight, but suicide doesn't stand on its own. There's something at play. I almost call it a symptom of something else going on in the person's life that causes the suicide. And in many cases, our research is showing that there's many different things crossing that would put somebody into a situation where they're at risk for suicide. This is also a telling slide that we now know, and because we are keeping better statistical data connected to suicide, that 9 out of 10 people have some sort of mental health or brain disease happening in their life that puts them in the spot of danger. We also know, and it's not on this slide, but we also know that when a person is in that dark, deep place that I call, they tend to medicate themselves, and then before you know it, now there's an addiction. So there's a co-occurring thing happening, and that puts a person even more at risk for suicide. We know in our country, because of the stigma, as I said earlier, connected to mental health or people dealing with suicidal thought, they don't go for help. And boy, we have to change that conversation. Wouldn't you agree? We can't be afraid to talk about it. And when somebody's hurting and needs that help, we got to do what we can and know that it's okay to ask for help. When I do suicide prevention training for students, one of the things that it's a little project. I give them a exercise where I have them take out an index card. I said, I'm going to have you write a name on this index card. No one's going to see the name. I want you to think really hard about if you were in trouble or you thought one of your friends were in trouble, what adult would you go talk to? Who was that most important, that you felt most comfortable with? Write that name on the card. Remember, no one's going to see it. You can write a name. And kids usually chuckle a little bit, and then it flip the card over, and I says, now I want you to write the second most important person in your life, their name on that card. And now the kids are much more quieter. I says, okay, now I want you to fold it over, put it in your pocket, and take it home and put it in a safe place that you'll remember. So if you ever think that you need to talk to that adult, you can do it. And I've gotten 2 phone calls since using that exercise that it worked. And we got somebody to help. So that's my story connected to the slide. We can't be afraid to go, get people to help and accept the help. We now know through AFSP's research that people who die by suicide's brains different from those who die from other causes. We're trying to figure that out. We don't quite know that, but the money that AFSP raises is, and with academia and research schools across the country are trying to figure it out from both structure and function. Structure of the brain and then how that brain works. So slide is pretty self-explanatory. If you want to Google an interesting story, a gentleman named Kevin Hines, who survived a suicide attempt off the Golden Gate Bridge. He tells this story the best. It just, at that time when somebody's at suicidal thought, they don't care about that anymore. They just want to end the pain. So this is an important, and Kevin Hines is a good place to go. He's got a very interesting story, and his book, Cracked But Not Broken, is an excellent read. Perspective, crisis point, that is a balancing point. Certainly, it's somebody who's at risk for suicide or is at the point of risk at suicide. Usually, there's a crisis that triggers it. Desperate to escape the pain, as I already said, and of course, the thinking is just not rational. That's what the research is showing. The goals of our research projects at AFSP is the biomarkers, so that's figuring out what's going on in the chemistry of the brain. The psychotherapy is connected to it, and there's some really interesting work now being developed. How do we help people who are suffering with suicidal thought or also have already lived through an experience? Interventions and certainly medications, and we know as medications have gotten better and better and better for folks who suffer from mental health disorder or brain disease. So who's at risk? We think about people in our society and folks, the person on the street, the man in at the supermarket. How do we know that they're at risk? What are the signs? What are the risk factors? What things are at play that would tell us that somebody at risk? And this is a pretty decent slide. It tells us that it's the person's health, if it's directly connected to some sort of condition that they have, historical, and our young people, as adults, we gone through life's challenges. We have life skills, and young people don't. So a breakup we might think is not a serious thing as adults, but for a young person it might be a real tragic thing, and they don't have the life skills to get over it. And there are other things in play. A loss of a job, financial duress in a family could affect some older, and then certainly environmental. Incarceration, somebody facing incarceration could easily, and with those other two factors in place, you can see how they kind of over and intersect, is where a person that potentially could be at risk for suicide could be. Here are the health factors that are risk factors when we look at suicide. Certainly depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, psychosis, substance abuse disorder, that's that co-occurring thing I talked about, could really put somebody at danger. And here's some other factors. Serious chronic health condition, serious or chronic pain. Head injury, again, the brain becomes dysfunctional. And then here are the environmental factors. Lethal means, exposure, prolonged stress, stressful life events. Kind of ties it together for you. And here are more historical factors. Families who are in the journey of loss of suicide are more at risk for suicide. The statistics will bear it out clearly. Mental health conditions, child abuse, and then somebody that's already attempted once before, are all people who have these risk factors in place that we need to watch out for. What others know, there's discussion about genetic risk, and that's really intense study right now on, our genetics put us more susceptible to depression or to suicidal thought. Prolonged stress at work, and then certainly drinking more than usual, are all those things that can, one standing alone, maybe not, but when you put them all together, certainly should be concerned. And here's our prevention. When somebody's challenged with a mental health crisis or has suicidal thought, we know as a community that the first thing we need to do is put some protective factors around them. And here are some examples. Certainly mental health care, and Connecticut has a decent system. We might not be able to access it as easy as we can, but it's pretty good. And the family and community support, the community support, that's what we're doing today. Problem-solving skills, cultural and religious beliefs can play a large part in helping protect people from deciding to attempt a suicide. Here's the problem: 1 in every 5 are the ones that only seek mental health. So we're missing folks if folks are not going to get the necessary treatment that they need. And we got to break through the cultures. Mental health is just as important as physical health. And if we can get our society to understand that, we'd be a whole lot better off. Mental health treatment, talk therapies, medication, counseling are all other forms of protective factors that we can put in place. And then, of course, some other treatments. Our current law, I say that, our current law, requires insurance plans to cover mental health services at the same as physical health services. That was part of the Affordable Health Care Act that was passed. And again, accessing and how much the coverage is based on what you have, it all depends. but prior to that, this was not the case. Here's some other protective factors, and these are pretty self-explanatory. You want to be able to take care of yourself and do the healthy things. Sleep, I haven't been getting much of that lately. I'm going to change that. These are things that help to protect somebody from that bad place. Access to lethal means is, as I said earlier, we know that women attempt suicide more than men, but men tend to use more lethal means. So knowing that, firearms is not a safe thing to have around somebody that's struggling with a mental health a disorder or crisis. We want to remove that. The same thing goes with medications and other things, because having those means at one's disposal can put them at certain risk. And so here are some of those places that, again, are carbon monoxide sensors in cars. Does everybody know that that new automobiles have sensors that shuts the car off? So, I didn't know that. I kind of learned that myself. And unfortunately, folks have used this method to die, and unfortunately successful. So now there's barriers on bridges. I don't know how many of you have been over the Golden Gate Bridge. I have years ago, and they have all the signs on there and everything. Would you know now they have safety nets? And Kevin Hines was a part of a coalition that got the funding and hired the architectural firm, so you didn't ruin the look of the bridge. But at least now the bridge is much more safer than it ever was. Making medications harder to get through, and certainly firearm safety. AFSP's position on firearms is on safety, not control. And they made that decision, cognitive decision. You can agree or disagree with it, but AFSP is really trying to focus on, is how do we make firearms safe around each other as opposed to danger, and especially when it comes to somebody that's at risk. Support for those who have lost somebody to suicide and those with lived experience is really important. As I said earlier, 1 in 6 are affected by suicide, and in any particular group, some say 1 to 4. I stick with the 1 to 6. What are the things that we do around helping communities and people in those communities when they've lost somebody to suicide? I've been in First Selectmen's offices where they've said, well, when there's a suicide in a family, we just leave them alone. We don't call them, we don't talk to them. And it really is the opposite. They need the help, they need the support. And when families go through that kind of experience, they might not take the help right away, but maybe 2 weeks, 2 months down the road, they will. And just the fact that somebody's checking on them to make sure they're okay, I think as a community, we should do. And thankfully, towns and cities have changing their opinion about that, their approach about that. Now, what can you do? We're sitting here, all right, we're going to try to put some of this information together and decide what's the best thing we can do. We can watch for warning signs. Warning signs differ from age groups. A senior citizen whose wife of many years just passed away, and he feels he's a burden on his family. Could be somebody at risk, or the teenager who all of a sudden starts giving away their prized possessions, or all of a sudden has an interest or a disinterest in religion. or you know, changing their friends from one set of friends, and all of a sudden they've withdrawn and then they're disconnected with the sign, or all signs that that a young person can be at risk. So really need to be sensitive to it. And I say to all the groups that I talk to about this subject, if your gut's telling you that somebody's in trouble, listen to it, because you're probably right. And it's time to take action and get some help for that person. Reach out. I always like to tell a story, and this is a true story. I did a QPR training a few years back, and it was about 30 people in the group. And I don't know, about maybe a month after the training, I get a call from one of the gatekeepers that I trained, and she tells me a story. She's at the Stop and Shop, and there's an elderly gentleman standing in front of the dairy cabinet. True story. And he's crying. The gentleman is obviously in distraught. What do you think what was happening in that grocery store? Most everybody was walking by. But that gatekeeper, because I got trained, and it was okay, this man is in trouble. She went up to him and started to talk to him, and what's wrong? And he was very disoriented. She was able to get another patron to go get the store manager, and the store manager came. And by that time, the gatekeeper had, he was doing going to get food, and basically had a breakdown, right? And he was living with his daughter, so they were able to call his daughter, and before you knew it, there was help, and there was no sirens or anything. I was just getting this man to help, and the story ended up really well. He did all right. So it works. Well, we can't be afraid to stop, and if we see somebody in distress like that, to make the attempt to seek how to point somebody to the place where they can get help. Two things I like to tell all audiences: if the person's at risk of himself or others, it's a 911 call. Our police officers, especially here at Simsbury, are well trained. They have special called crisis intervention training. They know how to deal with this kind of stuff. You never want to put yourself in risk. If it's not, if it's a young person, there's the mobile crisis, EMPS that you can call, the school system. I know all the schools work very closely with those folks here, with young people that are in trouble. There's 211 that you can call if you have an adult who's in trouble. And when you call 211, there's always a counselor on 24/7. Might take a couple steps to get it. You gotta be patient when you get into that system. But I've tested it a couple times, and it took a couple steps to get there, and then when I got to the counselor, I said, I'm sorry, secret shopping. But it worked. So I think there are ways that, if you really think somebody's in trouble, in gatekeeper training, we call it the safety net. If one of my friends was in trouble, but I couldn't get him to talk to me about what was going on, I would then look beyond the net and find maybe a brother or a sister or clergy or somebody that I know that is connected to this person, because maybe they'll talk to that person instead of me, working to try to get that person to help. Anytime somebody starts talking about suicide, they're at extreme risk, and that's you gotta go full board, get them help. Any kind of talk about suicide, and you think, if I don't get that job, I think I'll kill myself. How many times have you heard somebody joke like that? Well, that maybe would be a joke. But if there are other things going on, like strange behaviors, bad mood, some of those other things I just talked about, then that's not a joke. That's a real thing. And so the key message here is take all warning signs seriously. Stop, think, evaluate. Here are some of the points with talk. You can read the sign. These are key points that you can read when somebody's talking to you that potentially is at risk. Here's some of the behaviors. The drug abuse is a real obvious one. I talked about isolation from friends and families, giving away prized possession. Some of you in this room know me. I have an old Porsche. If I went to give that Porsche away to my friend Philip in the audience, my family would know I was sick and would have to get me some help. So pride, and I'm kidding a little bit, but prized possessions is important, you know, especially with young people. If you start giving away things, that would be, that's just a sign. It's a warning sign and they need to deal with it. And a lot of talk about mood, especially in the school systems. Anxiety is a high one. Impulsivity for young people is certainly a sign that something is going on. Depression is certainly speaks for itself. But those are some of the things that you should watch out for. Trust your gut. I beat the slide. You really. When I do suicide prevention training for educators, it always comes down to this. A teacher in a classroom that has a student and they know something is wrong. And in Simsbury, they've got great system in place where teachers can go and connect to make sure that student gets help. It's so important. But you know, it takes all of us. And if you're a parent and you think your son or daughter is in trouble, know that there are lots of resources in our town that you can tap to be sure that A, we can understand what's going on, and B, get that person to help. And again, it can be a husband, it can be a wife, it can be a friend, it can a family member, or the gentleman in front of the milk machine at the Stop and Shop. All applies. And second to last slide, talk saves lives. If we're learning anything through all of the research that's being done, especially the past 10 years, like today, we're talking about suicide. You know, and it's on our local public television thing. This is what we need to do as a society to change the way we look at suicide, way we look at mental health, and take mental health to mental health promotion as opposed to mental health illness. I was in a meeting earlier today, and I was like, no, we have to promote good mental health, and we'll avoid suicide. We'll try, and you know, there's a lot of people, and I'm in that boat. You know, suicide's been in our society a long time, but I think we can zero it. If we really work at it, we can zero it. But it's going to take us all to do it. How to reach out. These are some clues to where, if you are faced, and think about it, if you're faced with talking with somebody about suicide, it'd be a pretty stressful situation. Here are some things you can do to help make that person feel comfortable enough to share with you that they're in trouble, you know, and certainly encouraging them to get help. I call it, you know, put a pause in your life. If somebody has told you that they've had suicidal thought, your life goes into pause. Your job then is to take that soul and get them to a place of help so that they can live. Just my opinion. And here's some of the some things that you should really avoid. You know, us guys, we like to fix things. You know, when somebody's in this place, there's no easy fix. And we don't want to preach to them. We want to tell them that we want you to live. We want you to get help. I'll go with you. Let's make it happen. And avoid these things. And here's a slide that talks directly about it. You know, stay with them. Lethal means, got to remove the lethal means, and escort them. You know, put that pause in life. Take them to where you need to go. This is the suicide prevention hotline. It's a national hotline. Connecticut subscribes to it. Which means if you dial this number and you're in trouble, you'll get a counselor. And you'll get a Connecticut counselor. That's not the same as a lot of other states. Some states that don't subscribe to the hotline, you'll get a therapist in another state, unfortunately. But Connecticut has made a commitment to be sure that that is done. We talked about emergencies, 911. At risk of themselves or others, it's a dial 911. And remember, Simsbury Police are trained, and we're so fortunate to have that. And here's some other resources I just kind of created. You got the hotline. I brought some materials on the side table for you to use, and so that some of that information is there. Top left, the one word, one voice, one life. This is our statewide marketing campaign to bring awareness to suicide prevention. And PreventSuicideCT.org is a website that has everything connected to our state when it comes to suicide prevention. It's a great resource. I strongly recommend that you go there. You can sign up there's emails, you can sign up for the distribution list, and it's just a really good resource for all walks of life. And then there's your 211 call that I spoke about earlier. That's the culture. I've been talking about that all along. We got to be smart about it, and we got to change the culture so that we can get people to help when they need it. I got one more slide, but no one asked me any questions, so I'm like, I'm going to pause before I go to my last slide. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you go into the junior high or high school as a routine program with that age group?
Yes, I have. Several school systems. Here in Simsbury, we've taught all of the faculty and department heads, and maybe that might be a good next step for us. The town of Farmington is now included QPR in their curriculum, their health curriculum. So they have sophomores and seniors. Sophomores, second year into school, and then seniors as for that transition out. So there could be a place. I'm sorry, Farmington was first, and what I did is I went in and trained the trainers, the health teachers, so that they can employ it. And it's all built around safe messaging, and it's about risk factors and warning signs, and what do you do? How do you get people to help? When I train the different school faculties, towards the end of the training, it's an ideal time for administration going to come up and say, here's our protocols. If you think somebody in Simsbury does it here. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but not all school systems do. You'd be surprised. So know that that's in place for our students here in Simsbury. And I think, once a year, once every other year, and it's a part of a teaching manual they have, a whole booklet that the teachers get at the beginning of the year. It's a great tool. And getting teachers to talk about it sometimes is a little hard, like the rest of the society, but just knowing that those resources there are really important. Yeah.
For older people, could you give us sort of an example of the Q part of, you have a friend, a
Right.
colleague, somebody like you were saying about not getting a job.
Right.
I'm sure that line of questioning sounds a lot different than it would with a teenager or somebody in the 18 to 24 group. How do you start that with somebody who's not a family member, they're
Right.
an acquaintance?
Yeah, this is part of the QPR training, so I'll try to do a short version for you. There are clues. Some of them are direct clues, and some of them are coded clues. So somebody might be saying, well, I just feel in such a bad place. I'm thinking about ending my life. That's a direct clue. And so that that's a different approach. But then there are indirect clues where it's more around the corner that you have to ask more questions. Gee, you haven't been feeling very well lately. You haven't been yourself. What's going on? Tell me what's happening in your life. Especially with young people, you kind of go with that inquisitive route to get them to speak. The environmental clues and the situational clues that we teach in QPR for older people, certainly situation. I was talking about the older gentleman who lost his wife, Marge, at 60 years and feels he's a burden on his family. He's at risk. He's done everything, and he doesn't want to be around anymore. And you can tell somebody goes into that place where their psyche comes to a spot. So, it's the gut. You gotta, we're not social workers, well, at least I'm not anyway. But so you're like, gee, there's something wrong here. And
For someone like that,
yeah.
how do you persuade them to go to?
That's the P in QPR. Persuade. P in QPR. It's listening first. You've asked the question and they've told you now that they're in trouble. So now you want to persuade them to go get help. There's several different ways to do that. It's just taking their hand and going. Talking to, gee, I know that Pastor Woody, Pastor Woody, let's go see him. Getting them to agree that they will go and go out and get it. And they call it with a good faith commitment, which says, they promise to go. And I don't know if I trust that all that much, but it's evidence-based. They know through research that does two work. But if you sense there's a problem, just go. Come on, we're going. And we have those services. You just got to ask for them in our community. Thank God that we live in a community like that. The problem is from the slide, 1 in 4 don't go and get help. They block it because of the stigma about mental health disorder, and it's a challenge. So I understand what you're saying. It's not easy. That's the truth to it.
Where do you go? I mean, say this happens tomorrow. Like, you get in the car and go where? The hospital?
You go. Hospital is the first place, or a counselor, especially if that person's already seeing a counselor and already has an established relationship with a mental health professional. Hospitals always are good. There's 7 hospitals now, and I'm working with the 3 hospitals in Hartford about. They have special screenings now that they do when you go into emergency room. You can hold for 72 hours. And the system is not perfect, available beds depending on your age and whether you do need a hospital bed or not, but you can do that. You can go to the hospital and there's several different screenings. Some hospitals do one screening compared to the other. The fact that they're doing the screenings now, and this is relatively new, is comforting. The next step is trying to bridge the gap to where the treatment services are, and that when I'm out in public, that's where the challenge is. It's like, okay, we know they need help. How do we get past that next step? I don't have an easy answer.
If you sit with the person and dial 211 and get to a counselor, will they tell you?
Yeah, done it 3 times.
Yep.
For some people.
That's a method you could use.
Yep.
To sit down with someone and say,
Yep.
we're going to call together. And
Yep. Yep. Yeah, Phil.
The slide up there that you showed, which I think is ultimately extremely important. And if you don't necessarily get to the depth of what people think they should get to in reading that slide, in a way, a point is being missed. Talk saves lives. And it doesn't have to be that you're looking at a person who is crying at a counter, or it just looks like their head is down, or they don't look happy, or whatever. It's just a matter of everyone talking with people, because we tend to be an insular society, and we form groups.
Right.
And what does forming a group mean? Forming a group means you exclude others. So that exclusion unto itself is something that could engender some kind of feeling of remorse, of whatever it happens to be.
Isolation.
And if you just meet somebody, they've got something to offer you. Everyone has something to offer everybody else, no matter what. We don't think they do, but they do. And you just sort of start talking to them.
Yeah.
And what does that do? Suicide word does not appear in the vocabulary at that point in time. What appears is that somebody cares.
And is listening. Good point, Philip. Yes.
Well, to that point, I believe it was part of his story, the gentleman with the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right.
He said if someone had asked me, because I thought I was visibly upset, I wouldn't have tried.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
That's
And
it.
so that's, I think, the reasoning for the cue with the question.
Yep.
You know, just to notice someone
Yep.
and to ask makes a difference.
Yep.
You know, I remember when we went through the training, I had, you were giving out grocery bags, recyclable grocery bags,
Mhm.
and I've had 4 people come to me and say,
One
what does
word.
that mean?
One word,
what does
one
that
voice.
one word mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just never know. So
Yeah.
even that's a part of talk, and having that conversation of, oh, this is a resource. Oh, that's
Right.
great
Start,
to know.
Start the
And
conversation.
someone cares.
And someone cares enough
Sir?
to care about.
A couple of practical questions and one maybe out of the thing. So factor myth, 211, if you call it, they actually have a roving team that can go out and actually meet with you here in Simsbury. There are two
I'm
people
gonna
generally available on call.
Yes.
Come to a home if you have a
But not all of the time. I'm just be honest with you. The last budget cuts that we had in the state eliminated some of that for adult mental health crisis intervention through the 211. There's time restrictions to it. But I'm going to be honest with you. It used to be 24/7 for adult. It's 24/7 for young people, 18 and up,
24/7.
young people. But for adults, they're due to our state cutbacks. Just the reality of it.
24/7 for kids, that's what I was looking for. The other is, do students at the high school and the middle school know that teachers have been trained in this and know that they can direct a fellow student to a teacher?
So a lot of how that plays out, I was actually just thinking it's probably time to redo our training and to do a refresher. But we do a lot of talk with kids, whether that be through developmental guidance, going into homerooms. That's how it looks at the middle school and advisory at the high school. So it's not necessarily, hey, we've been through suicide training but the conversation is more of, if you're ever concerned about yourself, your safety, or someone else's safety, these are the adults that you can come to. So that's typically how it's framed through those very specific lessons that take place in homeroom and advisory.
Curveball, social media, obviously the whole vector has changed for communications.
Wow.
Kid gets a text from a friend,
Right.
shares it with their parents. What does the parent do?
Yeah. Here's my phone.
That leads
Yeah.
to-
My kids are in their 20s. The computer was in the family room. The screen was this big. The box was this big. This thing has like 50 times the computing power than my kids who are in their 20s. So and it all relates to social media. And to me, and when we train youth, and when I say youth, high school, freshmen and up, there are other programs for middle school that's a lot better, that talks more about feelings than about mental health or suicide. But the key thing with kids, and when I've done the training for the Boy Scout troop in town here is getting them that index card with the 2 names. If you see a friend that's got that's saying something on social media, that you go to that adult that you trust and say, oh, so and so just put this on Facebook. The other thing that's happening with social media is the social media providers are being much more proactive, and so Facebook and Instagram now, I believe, I'm not sure about Twitter, have places where members can report behaviors that they're worried about. I'll tell you a story, and this is a true story where. It was 2 young people in Connecticut were on some sort of social media. I think it was Facebook, and they were chatting or passing messages with a young person in Ann Arbor, Michigan, who was getting ready to take his life. Middle schooler. And it was 2 kids who went through not suicide prevention training, but program, it's called SOS. It stands for Signs for Suicide. But it's really talking about, and they talk about, and so the one kid kept talking to the young person from Ann Arbor who was in trouble, and the other friend went and called the police and said there's a young person in Ann Arbor who's thinking about taking his life. The police department called the Ann Arbor police. The Ann Arbor police went and did a wellness check or a safety check, and the parents were, the kid was in his room because these things have so much computing power, and the parents were downstairs. Parents had no clue that the young man was in trouble. Saved a life.
So I was going to offer, if you're comfortable calling that, and it's not, during the school day or it's on a weekend, because of course these things never happen at convenient times, right? Call the kid's parent if
Yep.
you're concerned, if you see something that's concerning, or
Yep.
call the Simsbury PD.
And I've done that. My son brought a phone to me in high school and said, look what somebody posted.
This is trouble.
And I said, he said, what do we do? And I said, either you've got to call the parents or I've got to call the parents. And you can call the parents with me in the room, or you can do it privately, but we have to notify this child's parents. And we did, and they immediately got help for this.
Because, yeah, but
I was just gonna say, there's, not to bring this to the different, there's 2 sides to that though. There's the side of sort of adolescence, the mainstream, offensive terminology that kids will tell other kids, so just go kill yourself.
right.
And how kids respond to that, and they use that in a very mainstream kind of way, not understanding what that terminology means, or if you do say that to somebody, how offensive that is. To me, I tell kids when there's streaming through on any kind of social media, if they're seeing that, whether it's an offensive gesture or a statement made, they have to take it all the same way, because they're all just as dangerous.
That's
and
right.
You never know who you're talking to and the state of mind that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
So, I tell kids on a regular basis, if they get something on social media that they're unsure about, it's a big burden to carry to not say anything to an adult. So go to an adult and ask them, at the very least, ask them.
Yeah, that's the point. I would say, if anything, I didn't get to apologize for being too much late for it, but
That's right.
the presentation, you may want to consider updating to include the concepts around social media as a sign.
Yeah, this was
Just the idea of a kid exiting social media would be a sign to me.
I'll bring that,
They've been
bring
blown
that.
out and therefore being
Right.
maybe pushed aside.
It's a really good thing.
In our gatekeeper training, there is a section in it. This is more of an introductory, but I will pass that along. That's a good suggestion. They could add on to it, because social media is how young people talk. When my youngest son was still living out at the house, he would text me when dinner was ready. It was just a story below. What are you? You can get up and you hungry?
They can make an offhanded remark
Yeah.
faster than they can.
Yeah. So yeah, very, very valid point. Very valid point. Yes, sir.
One comment about that is kids are much more apt to answer a text than they are to pick up the phone too, so it can be very helpful. But has the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention begun any work around assisted suicide? I know that Colorado just passed a law that it's become legal in Colorado, and I don't know if that's connected with their legalization of marijuana or not, but
you really have to take assisted suicide. There's really a whole different thing beyond somebody who is, as I call it, Sergeant Strites of life, not an MSW or a counselor. They're in this dark, deep place that is brought on their suicidal thought. Assisted suicide is usually somebody that has made a decision because of a chronic disease, as we saw. And it brings up all kinds of other issues that we could probably spend all night talking about. AFSP is not taking a position on it, I believe. I'm a volunteer with them, so, but I know they have taken a position on firearms, but I'll get that information. That's a good question, because I don't know exactly where AFSP stands with that. Good question. Very much. I have one more slide. Any more questions? I always end my presentations with this slide, and some of you in this room know this young man. This is my son Tyler, and we lost him 7 years ago to suicide. How he died is not as important as why he died, and he was in trouble. I call it that analogy that we draw by numbers. After Tyler died, we started drawing the numbers and all of the things we talked about. He had all of the warning signs, all of the risk factors, but kids don't talk, they talk to each other, they didn't talk to us, and he took his life. And, since that day, the first 2-3 months, there's some people in this room that were significant in helping me find my way to the other side to be able to talk about this, and I'm forever grateful to them. But I will tell you that being a survivor of loss of suicide, it creates a hole in your life that you just don't, unless you're there, you just don't know what it's like. And as I gone out, and I was telling the group earlier, I actually go and it's called a Suicide Survivors Outreach Program, part of AFSB, and talk to families who have just lost somebody to suicide, just to share them my story and to know that there's hope and then there's healing. And my wife and my two sons, the other two sons are almost off the payroll, thank God. But all four of us took our own path to heal. And so I can tell you that learning suicide prevention, and I did this with the faculty 2 years ago at Simsbury High, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room, I don't think, because several of the teachers had Tyler. I mean, he was not that much removed from the high school. If we had known, if Tina and his professors, he died at college. He was going to Savannah College of Arts and Design. He was a junior. If we only knew what we know now, maybe he'd still be alive. So that's why I offer this to you all and to the audiences. Don't be afraid to talk to your kids. Don't be afraid to talk to each other, and and to the community, and to the man standing in front of the milk machine. I don't know what they call that, milk machine, milk carton, or something. Because there are people out there at risk, and we can do a lot to help our fellow man if we're not afraid to talk about it and to do about it. So this is kind of Tyler's legacy for me, is telling his story, and he's a great kid. He's a great artist. Some recent things that have been very positive today told to me is I'm going to forget that it was a special ed teacher at the high school called me today, and Tyler gave her one of his art pieces when he was a senior, and she's retiring and moving, and we tried to get her to come today with the painting. It just didn't work out. So I share, in closing, we all go through this kind of healing, and there is a way to heal, but you never forget there's always a hole in your life. And so I use the analogy, the only way I can get through it is I got to build a bridge over that hole, and it's one board at a time. So today you've let me add another board to my bridge, And let's keep this conversation going. I think it's really important, and I'll go any place, anywhere, to help my fellow man when it comes to this. And so Tyler, focus on the dreams was his tattoo, but it was reversed, so he could read it on his chest. And the last time I saw Tyler was over the summer, and he wouldn't take off his shirt, and I wonder why, because he didn't want me to know he had it. So thank you all, and have a safe drive home in this bad weather. Thanks.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.